Hey, it's Jeff Sauer here, and I wanted to welcome you to another edition of Tools of the Trade. In today's video, we're going to talk about a tool that I use to schedule our podcast, any one-on-one calls that I need to have with my students, consulting calls, and all kinds of other good stuff. Now, before I discovered this tool, scheduling was a pain in my neck because I didn't really know how to let people know about my schedule. There were some awkward conversations about my personal travel schedule and the lifestyle I've come to live as a digital nomad. There's all kinds of interesting things that ended up happening as a result of trying to schedule a simple meeting. And I started to dread it until I found this tool. This tool is called Acuity Scheduling, and it's become a really vital part of our business. And so I wanted to show you exactly why we like it, give you a little bit of insight into how it works, and actually go into the tool and show you how we use it to improve our process here at Jeffalytics. So watch along if you want to see how this cool little tool can work for you as well. So I want to show you an inside look into how we have our podcast scheduling process, and specifically how we used one tool to make this go from a very random scattered process of trying to get a guest and scrambling each week to wonder who we're going to interview to having things scheduled months in advance, all by using this one program called Acuity Scheduling. It really has changed a lot of things for me, and I just want to show you how it works. So let's start out by defining the problem, and that is that maintaining my calendar sucks. Now, the problem isn't that I'm too busy or that I'm special. I actually really don't like it when people use busy as a crutch, because we're all busy. We're all trying to navigate this crazy world where there's push notifications going on 24/7. We're behind the second we wake up every day because of the way the internet works. Like, yeah, we're all busy. Get over it. And Jeff, get over yourself. That's not the problem here. That's not why this is there. The problem is that I don't like having awkward conversations and trying to schedule time with people when I live a certain lifestyle. Now, what do I mean by that lifestyle? Well, for a lot of people, you probably know that I'm a digital nomad. So I've been living out of a suitcase since 2015 and basically doing everything I can do with my business, growing the business, recording stuff, doing everything you see here in a temporary location. So I have to change locations a lot. I don't really have a studio. Although actually in our next video tomorrow, the behind the scenes one, you're going to see what my impromptu studio looks like where I'm recording this 90-day challenge. But basically up until this point, I haven't had the opportunity to have a stationary place. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to take a phone call, if the internet would work, any of that stuff. And so I would say, okay, well, yes, I would love to talk to you when somebody would ever inquire about something. And then I'd have to say, I'd like to talk to you 2 months from now. Or I would look at my podcast and I'd say, hey, I want you on the podcast. I'd love to have you be a guest. And here's the dates that I can meet. And it's like during this little window, like there's a 1 hour window on a Wednesday in the next 2 months. And that's when we can do this podcast. Are you available then? Didn't really work out very well. And so I was like, man, it felt like I was giving everybody the Brushoff. Like I was basically telling them that I was too important. And that wasn't the case at all. It's just I didn't know when my schedule was going to be out there. And I didn't want to have that awkward conversation where I had to justify my lifestyle. I had to tell people what I was doing. I had to basically either people would get mad at me, they'd think that I was bragging about it, or it would just lead to a long conversation about, hey, what do you like? What's your favorite place you've been to? All these other things. And so I just stopped doing it, and it sort of made me break down a little bit. I was like, man, am I even going to talk about this stuff at all? And so it was really weird. Now, what ended up happening was being Minnesota nice, which is a term we assign to people who are sort of passive aggressive, basically not doing something at all in order to avoid an awkward conversation. It led to me missing opportunities. There were some times where I just didn't take opportunities. Sometimes I just went away from stuff, and I missed guests for my podcast. There was times where we'd have a slot open and we wouldn't know who to put in it. We'd be like, hey, who's going to be going live? Our podcast goes out on Thursday and it's Tuesday. Do you have anybody? And I'd have to scramble, try to find somebody who was available on short notice. All these things that aren't going to work as we grow this business. Now, I gave you a look in video number 21 about how project planning was our number one thing. Adding process to Jeffalytics was the number one thing we wanted to do. It's the number one thing we wanted to do in 2018. I showed you that in episode 21, and I used the podcast as an example as to how we've gotten better. Now, even though we had the written down process and we had the process in Asana for how do we produce the podcast, getting a guest was still sort of a chore. And it was still hard to tell people when I was available and explain my calendar and explain how I was traveling between different time zones, different continents, different hemispheres, all those things. And so I finally said, why don't I just get one of those calendar apps that everybody talks about and see how that works? And I tried Calendly. I didn't like it at all. I tried a lot of these other ones that people talk about, and they just seemed too lightweight. They didn't do what I wanted them to do. I wanted to have multiple calendars. I wanted to be able to interface with my family calendar, with my wife. I wanted to be able to interface between my Gmail and my professional email. I wanted to do a lot of stuff. And these other things had all these complications. They'd only let me do one thing, or it cost an exorbitant amount of money to add a second calendar. And I was like, well, I want these complex business rules. Just give me the best. And I found one that I love. It's called Acuity Scheduling, and it's really great. This is just the homepage showing you what it looks like. I'm going to go in there in just a second, but I really like this software. And so let me show you why I love it. So I'm going to go into the website and just show you why we love it so much. Okay, so here we are in Acuity, and this is what I see when I log in. Basically, it has my entire process. Anything that's in green was something that was scheduled by Acuity. As you can see, some of our upcoming podcasts, I'm going to be scheduling and recording them very soon here. And here's basically how we have this whole thing set up. So I can see what my normal calendar looks like. And this actually pulls in several of my calendars. If I look at my business settings, I can see that it's synchronizing with all kinds of calendars, both my Google Calendar, my family iCloud calendar. And then when I look in here, I can set what my availability is. So I can tell people when I'm available. So as you look at this, you can see the date that I'm recording this. This is going live. This is video number 28. So that means that it's going to be going live towards the end of February, but I'm actually recording it in January, trying to get ahead of the game because I'm going to Hungary, and that's where all this is blocked off and nobody can use my time because I'm going to be going to the conference in Hungary. And then you can see availability for February. You can see that I'm gone. I'm going to be getting back into the office on the 5th, and then basically February is open for recording podcasts and for doing meetings with people. Now, what type of appointments do I schedule with Acuity? I thought you'd never ask. We have agency course where I do my one-on-one calls with students, people who have paid extra to do one-on-one calls with us. I use this to schedule meetings for our apprenticeship. Now, you probably don't know this, but I've adopted an apprenticeship model at Jefflytics, and so when people join my team, they become an apprentice, and I teach them everything that I know about a certain topic, and then also get them invested in growing the business. And so we've got some awesome apprentices, and we use Acuity scheduling to set up those meetings, to give them a time where they could find a time on my calendar. For Jefflytics, we have Catch Up with Jeff, we have case study calls, we have podcast episodes, we have, even when I'm trying to sell something, we have pre-sales calls, we have training calls. I have all these different things set up, and all I need to do is I click on a scheduling link, and then somebody can go in there and they can record a podcast with me. They can talk to me. They can do anything that we want to do within our system. And so it's really cool how this thing works. I've been really happy with this process, and it's made everything so much better. But it doesn't just stop there. The other thing that we really like about it is these intake form questions. So for example, when I'm looking at my podcast, I can say, here's the questions that you have to answer before you can join me on the podcast. So if I click on edit here, I can say, here's basically an introduction to our podcast process. Then we have the first question we ask in the podcast, which is, what is the first project breakthrough that you got into digital marketing? This is the question we ask on every single one. And I don't know if I screen it, but I just get people prepared to talk about this question on the podcast. So they fill it out, and then like, how do we introduce you? What's your title? This is just avoiding any awkward conversations later on. This is exactly how we describe them in our episode. What are they interested in? This is in case things are not going very well in the podcast, or if they're going great, I can lead them in the direction of the things that they find interesting. Specific things they want to cover, both about their business or anything else they want to talk about. We say, give us links and stuff for our show notes, so we don't have to collect that later on. We can just get it right in there. See, this is really awesome, right? Because like, we're collecting all the stuff that we need to produce our podcast, and we're letting them do it at their own pace. Basically, they fill these things out, and then they get to be put onto the podcast. And then they give us a headshot. We use that to order the artwork that we use, that we make the cartoons. So basically, whatever headshot you want to give us, we'll use that to make a cartoon for you. I used to have to go and stalk people on LinkedIn and work on like 250 pixel images. Now I just have them upload a nice headshot here, and then the address. Like, what is their address, so we can send them a postcard. And then we send them postcards when they're done with their artwork, and basically say, thanks for joining us on the podcast. And this process, it used to take a while to try to dig this stuff up. It led to many awkward back and forth emails. And now all that we have to do is send them a link to our special recording the podcast episode at Jefflytics. Now, I'm not going to show you the URL to get there because it is a secret page. They have a little bit of humor in here, and basically say, okay, when do you want to have a podcast recording with Jeff? You click on set time zone. Then you can see when I'm available. Now, I don't let somebody book more than 24 hours in advance, so you can see that there's only one day available. And then I've already booked up my entire Thursday with other stuff going on, so you can't even book that. There's only one day that's available. So maybe they can get it in this day if they really want to talk to me, or they'll see, hey, Jeff's not available till February, and then he's a lot more available, and then they can choose a time they want to meet. Here's the times that I'm available. Now, it blocks off time automatically if I have another meeting or another appointment, and it adheres to these 30 minutes before and after rules. I like to make sure for things like a podcast that I give them plenty of time, and I give me plenty of time mentally to unwind. And so I have an hour on either end before I do a podcast so that I'm not doing them back to back. It really is nice to do it that way. You can see this day there's a lot more available. Basically, I'm available that whole day. And then, of course, I inject some more humor in there. Thank you for being a friend, for joining me on the podcast. And so this is how the podcast scheduling works. It's worked really well for us to this point. We get all the stuff that we need up front in these intake form questions. We don't have nearly as much email back and forth as I used to, and it's all in one spot. And so the rest of the team can go through and they can pull down the avatar, they can do the postcard, they can do all these things that normally I had to do because I was the only one who knew them because I was the one sending an email. This just works so well. It's really changed the face of this part of our business. And it's not just a podcast thing. You can see anytime that I talk to people, anytime I do pre-sales calls, it all goes through this system. I save myself a lot of time. It helps me inform my wife when I'm working on things because she can see it on the calendar. It's really just been a godsend to us in the business. And it works so well that I can't even imagine life without it. It's one of those things where I will always be using this software because it's that good. It really is that good. And I love what it's done for the business. So that's why we like Acuity scheduling so much. And that's what it looks like when you're inside of it. So hopefully you enjoyed that perspective into our business. Let me recap my favorite things about Acuity scheduling. Number one, it lets you have multiple calendars, and it can do something like synchronize with your iCloud family calendar, which is really cool. I like that it lets me synchronize things, and it also blocks off time on all my calendars. Works perfectly. To the intake forms, you saw our podcast intake form. You saw how it eliminated a lot of back and forth email and getting things lost in the shuffle. When somebody books a time, they have to give us all the information we need. And yes, it's putting a little bit of burden on them, but it's a one-time burden instead of a multiple-time burden. Number three, you can have multiple appointment types. You can choose which types of appointments you want. You can either embed them on your site, or you can just get a direct scheduling link that you can send out to somebody. You can add padding to your meetings before and after. I showed you that with my podcast. I like to pad it by 60 minutes on either side. With these ones, these one-on-one calls, which also takes some mental bandwidth, I pad it 30 minutes on each side. It's very easy to manage your schedule. Whenever I have to go out of town for something, whenever I'm teaching, whenever I'm not available or I'm not going to be able to do a recording, that's another thing here, is that I don't always have the equipment to do a recording, so I block off that time. I don't let people schedule a meeting when I'm going to be with family, or if I'm going to be in a loud place or a noisy room or an Airbnb that isn't very consistent, or I don't know if the internet's going to work. Those times are blocked off because then I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to deal with it. And number 6, you can embed it on your website. Now, I had some fun with that embed. I sort of tried to make it funny, but yes, you can do whatever you want to on here, and you can just give somebody a link, and that way you're not changing the link over and over again. If you want to schedule my podcast, you just go to that page, and my team can send that out to anybody, and people can schedule it, and I don't even have to be involved sometimes. There's an example of a podcast that I'm recording tomorrow where I just said, hey, send them a scheduling link, and they scheduled it, and that person's ready to go. It's cut down a lot of time. It's made us more efficient. And the thing is that it's not about saving me time. It's not about Jeff being busy. It's never about that at all. What it's about is that the rest of the team can do their job now because they're not waiting on me. They're not letting me be a bottleneck. They can see when I'm available because I just mark it off in the app, and then they know, oh, hey, Jeff's not available right now. Must be doing something else. And so everybody can just see what's going on here. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to pull it out of my brain. And we don't have to pull it out of the brain of our guests either because we're asking them for the information that we need to do a successful podcast. So as you can see, I'm a big fan of Acuity scheduling. Now, if you're interested in learning about this tool, just go to jefflytics.com/Acuity and you can check it out. Just go right to the Acuity site and just see what it's all about. See if you like it. I like it a lot. There's other tools out there. They're cheaper. There's tools that are free. They can do these things. But I chose to pay like $20 a month for these extra features because it has made my life so much easier and it's made my team so much better. Now, if you like this video or if you like any of our videos, I would love it if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Jeffalytics, and you can check out all the cool things we're talking about, get these behind the scenes looks. You can get the tools of the trade, the tools we use to build our business. You can do things like look behind the scenes into how we make all this work, get analytics tips, PPC tips, all the cool things that we're doing as part of our 90-day challenge. And not only that, but if you sign up for the 90-day challenge at jeffalytics.com/90days, you'll just get an email delivered every single day with our latest video and a write-up that supports that video, and you can follow along with the 90-day challenge. You can get inspired to do better on your end with your marketing, with your efforts. You can use the tools we use. You can do the exact process. Now, this might seem like a lot of work, a lot of content that we're creating, and it is. It absolutely is. But we could not do it if we didn't have these tools in place, if we didn't have a process, and we didn't have a great team. And so the reason why we're doing these behind the scenes, these tools of the trade videos, is because I want to show you exactly why we chose them and how they make our lives easier and how they're going to make your lives easier too. So hopefully you enjoyed this perspective. Next week, we'll do another tool of the trade. And then tomorrow, you're going to get that behind the scenes look into our production process. What it looks like at the Jeffalytics production studio, or the makeshift production studio I have, how we put this stuff together, and all kinds of cool goodies are going to come if you sign up for this list and you get notified about our next video. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.